Hartlik goeiemiddag, Linsen, my skeieregter bestuurder van die Boland Rugby Unie. Ek het vir Son Velsman vandag hierso om vir ons 'n bietjie die tackle height law te verduidelik. En ek hoop dat die video wat ons nou vir julle gaan wys, gaan regtig baat vind by die 2024 rugby seisoen. Baie dankie, Son Velsman.
So my name is Sean Velsman. I'm part of the Referee Society in the Boland Rugby Union. So in the beginning of the year, SA Rugby came out with the introduction of the new tackle height law that will be introduced at club level as well as school level. So the main reason for the introduction of the tackle height law was that there was a scientific research that was done over an extended period of time, and the main reason for the research was that players got injured, had injuries, etc., etc. So then SA Rugby, in conjunction with World Rugby, came up with a plan to do some research to establish where most of the injuries actually happen in terms of when tackles do take place and when tackles do happen. And they've introduced now the new tackle height law that will be introduced as of the beginning of this year. Also looking forward for us to have it now in club rugby introduced, which in club rugby in Boland starts on the 2nd of March. And I really hope that the guys are really well prepared, because it is something that is coachable, and I'm looking forward to have a great season with the clubs in terms of the tackle law. Okay, so I just want to demonstrate the zones in terms of where tackles do actually happen. So we all know that as in the past, above the shoulder line is an illegal tackle. So the normal process here will still take place. What happens now is that with the tackle height introduction, we've determined that most dangerous tackles and injuries happen above the sternum of a player. So now, this year will be penalized. Above the sternum and between the sternum and the shoulders, that could potentially be penalized by the referee, right? So the safe zone for a player to tackle the ball carrier would be below the sternum and the knees, right? So that is where the tackle is supposed to happen. Not on the knees. Right, the reason for that not being on the knees is that there could potentially be head injuries that could potentially take place. So the other tackle that can happen should be below the knees. In other words, you should wrap both arms around the player's legs if you tackle below the knees. There should not be an attempted tackle below the knees. So what we are going to do now, we're going to straight to you in terms of the player's height. So this is going to be the tackler in this instance, and we're going to focus on his body position to make a tackle, because he's got the ball carrier. So can we get the ball? There we've got the ball. You can see the ball was kicked over to him. And now this player is going to make a tackle. It's important now for him to tackle the ball carrier. He needs to adjust his height. Very important. Okay? So we're going to get him to go in below the sternum. Perfect tackle. Fantastic. Right? You can clearly see that his body weight, his body height, right? It's not below the 90 degrees. And also that it's almost in line with his spine and his hips, and it's below of the ball carrier. So this is a perfect tackle taking place here. So in this case here, this is what we actually want to see at every tackle. So in terms of the ball carrier, it's also important that when he takes up the ball in open play, right, he also adjusts his body, right, going down. If he wants, he can either shoulder and try to protect himself and shield him for the tackle. So this is a perfect position for him to go in, and the ball is still available to his players. So he can go in there, bend his knees. You can clearly see that both of these players' knees are bent, they're low, so no injuries could potentially actually happen in this case. So what cannot happen with a ball carrier is that the ball carrier cannot go below 90 degrees with his head lower than the hips, like in the past, and then make contact. Right? You can clearly see where he is going. In other words, if his head is lower than his hips, that is going to be penalizable. 90 degrees, knees down on 90, but head not lower than the hips and shoulders. Okay, so what we also try to demonstrate with this tackle is very important. We want to avoid head contact. So it's important that players don't go upright into a tackle like this, because we want to avoid and make sure that there is space between the heads, because that is where most of the head collisions actually take place. Also going forward now, it's important to note that in the past we were focused heavily on the defending player. Now we're also focusing on the attacking player. In other words, the ball carrier as well as the defending player. So what we're going to demonstrate now is the new tackle height law is not applicable to the tackler assist unless the tackler assist makes contact with the head of the ball carrier. Alright, so we've got two Boland players here who's going to demonstrate for us the new tackle height law. Alright, so we're going to go in. So there's going to be the tackler, then the tackler assist goes in. Alright, you can clearly see that this guy here that I'm touching here is the tackler assist, looking at the arms, where the arms are. He's the first tackler. So this is this guy is perfectly fine. But if he goes up to there, right, not to his neck, up to there, that would be perfectly fine because he's bent at the knees and everything. He cannot be penalized, right, because the primary tackler is over here on this side. He should not make contact with the neck, head area of the ball carrier. So another instance where this law will not be applicable will be at the pick up and drive when there's a tackler ruck in front of the ball carrier team. Right, so these two guys would be forming a tackle, or the ball would be available there between them. Right, turn around, there's going to be a ruck. Right, this player there is going to get the ball, he's going to pick up and drive, and he's going to go in to another player there. He can go in as low as possible and he will not be penalized because that is a pick up and drive. He's not passing the ball to another player. So what we're going to demonstrate now is that this is also not applicable to in an attempt to score a try. Picking up the ball, gets tackled close to the goal line. There he can't reach to the goal line and he places the ball back to his oncoming teammates. So what we're going to demonstrate now is that what is also now illegal is latching. So latching is when you bind onto another player from your arm to your shoulder. That is also illegal now, and it normally happens after a ruck or a tackle is formed close to the goal line, mostly, that we will see this action. Bind. So that is illegal pre-contact, right? In other words, the ball carrier and this guy here, this guy will now be penalized, right, according to the new tackle height law, because what has he done? He has latched on the ball carrier before the ball carrier made contact with the defending player. If the ball carrier, so what he can do, he can literally just put his arm on that player, but not bind, arm to shoulder. Ball carrier picks up the ball, right, he can go, right, and then after contact, then he can bind onto the ball carrier afterwards. So what we are going to demonstrate now is the cannon arm. So it's illegal for the ball carrier to put his hand on the ground or his arm on the ground. In other words, you cannot put your arm on the ground. The law says now clearly that you cannot use any body part to propel yourself forward in any tackle situation. So we're going to demonstrate that now. Okay. So that is illegal. In other words, that cannot happen. This player can literally use his left arm to propel himself forward and go, which is a danger for the defending players. Another law that's also being introduced at club rugby level, schoolboy rugby as well, is the 50-22. So what happens with the 50-22 is when the ball carrier gets the ball in his own 50 meters, in other words, from the halfway line up to his dead ball line. He then kicks the ball towards the opposition's half. The ball rolls out inside the 22 meters of the opposition. What happens is that the kicker will then get the line out. In other words, the ball does not have to land inside the 22. It can land before the 22 meters of the opposition and rolls out in the 22 into touch, and then the opposition or the attacking players will still get the line out.
As hy, vreeslik baie dankie Son Velsman. Ek hoop dis meer duidelik. Jy kan ook op die SA Rugby website kan jy gaan kyk na die nuwe tackle height law, ook die 50-22. Namens die Boland Rugby Unie en die skeieregtersvereniging wil ons een en elk toeskouer, skeieregter, spelers wil ons sterk seisoen. Mag rugby seëvier. En onthou skeieregters is maar net mense, hulle maak foute. Almal maak foute in die lewe. So kom ons respekteer ons skeieregters vir 2024 en ons gaan uit en ons gaan geniet met ons rugby. Mag die beste span dan aan die einde van die dag wen. Baie dankie.